Good day, everybody, and welcome to Splints and Whiskey. We are the podcast that has gotten together with military, medical, combat training, trauma training professionals, really CONUS, but globally. And we have an awesome opportunity to talk about best practices when we're serving for military medicine, for combat medicine. We put together an awesome community here, and I love it because it's a place for medics, corpsmen, airmen, guardians, gosh, paramedics, first responders, all of you guys to get together and talk about your best practices and how you can better be efficient in training so that we can save more lives and increase our outcomes. Today, I am so excited. I get to introduce all of our listeners to my dear friend, Captain Jake Wiemann. Jake and I met, gosh, virtually. I don't know how many years it's been, but it's been, probably
at least 2 or more, yeah.
Yeah, it's been a couple years. And, I think if you're passionate about what we do, then passion loves company, and we tend to attract the same amount of people. And I don't know what we did, if I read an article you sent or you did something or something, but anyway, we started kind of following each other's stuff. And one thing that I really appreciate about you is I deal with military professionals, medical professionals each and every day. I have for over 20 years. And I remember one time I needed a question answered, and somebody had brought up Great Lakes, and I remembered that your bio said that you were there, and I'm like, I'm gonna text that or message that person, and we hadn't met yet, and I messaged you this question that was really pertinent to me, to the Navy, to healthcare, to our business, and you got back to be like immediately. That meant so much to me. You gave me resources, you helped me. And out of the blue, I'm like, I need to meet this guy. And then thankfully, your command has brought you here, and I've gotten to meet you in person. And I'm so thankful for that. So I'm excited for the world to talk to you, the world of trainers. Not only is Jake in the United States Navy stationed at the Comfort, and he can talk to you about that, but also he is an active paramedic, a trainer, firefighter, the SWAT team. I mean, gosh, this guy is someone who I think we're going to learn a lot from today. And so, Jake, first I want to say welcome to the podcast. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Sure. Thank you for saying yes. Also, thank you for wearing your salute to service sweatshirt for the Kansas. Yeah, go Chiefs. I'm wearing my Steelers shirt, so we're kind of twins, but I'm looking for a stairway to 7, and you're looking for a 3-peat. So I'll cheer for you guys if we don't go, vice versa.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. We'll call it that. We'll call it a truce. I do have my homes on my fantasy league, so that's a good start. And your kicker, whoever he may be this week. So anyway, so will you please tell listeners about, give us your, if you don't mind, give us your background and, and it's kind of your verbal resume, if you don't mind. And then I would love to just pick your brain and talk to you about, trends in training, things that you're seeing today, both in law enforcement and EMS and military, and just to have a conversation about that, if that works for you.
Sounds great. Yeah.
Awesome.
You mentioned the Comfort, so I'll start at the top and then kind of work backwards. So currently, then I am the commanding officer for the Navy Reserve of the Comfort. So then of the Comfort, go into a little bit, you'll not belabor it, but then I'm the commanding officer for approximately 260 sailors that augment the active duty. So there is, just for people understanding, because even people with active duty, it's a kind of unique command. It has a reduced operating staff, so that is the full-time staff that's always on their full-time command. And then they have full operating staff, FOSS, which is combined now, just about a year ago, switched this up, is that the remainder of the staff that augment that ship comes from the MTF, primarily there at Naval Medical Center Portsmouth, but then now they're getting that full operating status augmented by some reservists. So then that would be where our reservists come in, and there'd be 260. So that there's different layers of levels of mobilization for the ship. And so with that, then that's how we help them out and augment the active duty. So we have majority of my sailors come from the East Coast, have to do a few to be able to fill out the billets. But with that, we have about 12 doctors, 35 nurses, and then a little over 200 corpsmen that would be part of the reserves that augment the full staff there. And so then by trade for the Navy, I am a nurse corps officer, joined in 99 into the Navy. So ER is my specialty, subspecialty. With that, began my career at Portsmouth. But prior to that, this is where then now that in the Navy, then now I'll revert and then kind of chronological it up. So, and then help within my mentality. So I grew up on a farm, was a farm boy in Iowa, grew on a pig farm, cash crops. We had 1,000 acres, 400 or 500 head of hogs, rural Iowa, and then also played football. And then so went on to college and then played, was fortunate to get a full ride scholarship to play at University of Central Missouri. And there was going to go physical therapy, but then ended up, was already going medical, fell into nursing, got my nursing degree there, and then met a great friend. He's, still active duty over in Japan right now, Commander Eric Bach. He went to nursing school with him. He was working, we were both working civilian in the community. I'm here in Kansas City, so I was working at a local hospital. We were both, based on our backgrounds, he was prior enlisted a tow gunner in the Marine Corps. And so we were both kind of bored. And then he's like, hey, why don't we, join the Navy? And so I was like, yeah, with my mentality. That time was super green, didn't know anything about the military. My understanding was basically more of what corpsmen do. And then quickly when, I got there, was in a uniform, was my first duty and only duty station was Navy Medical Center, Portsmouth. And so then was right there working, did ICU step down, ICU labor and delivery was what I worked there. And so then did 4 years active duty. The war started, long story short, if I would have known how long it lasted, whatever, I was wanting to get in the fight. Mainly it was just Army, medicine, and then Marine Corps elements of medical that were going downrange. Anybody knew that initially at the beginning, I was wanting to get there, young person trying to prove their manhood, so to speak. So I tried to transfer over into the Marine Corps as a Marine Corps officer. That fell through because the big man upstairs, Lord, knew that I wasn't supposed to be a trigger puller. I was supposed to stay in medicine. So that kind of fell through, which is kind of its own story. So, but then I got right back into, stayed right into nursing, and then did travel nursing there from Virginia Beach, was going up to Springfield, Woodbridge, Virginia, Richmond, and then the Norfolk, Virginia Beach area. Did that for a year. Then a buddy that I played college football with knew how I wanted to be outside in the field, missing the camaraderie from, like college football. So then he, told me about firefighting, paramedic, thought it would be kind of a perfect blend for me. So then I came back to a suburb here of Kansas City, Lee Summit, Missouri. And then in 2005, and luckily was very fortunate to get onto the fire department there. And so then I've been a firefighter paramedic ever since, still kind of in that role. And so at the same time, then been in the reserves. So in the reserves, so paramedic on the civilian side, but then a registered nurse corps officer in the Navy. But then to maintain that, I've had to work PRN for the last 20 years. And then most of that has been in a level 1 trauma ER. So then anywhere from 1 to 4 shifts a month, I would over the years work it was Research Medical Center here in Kansas City. So inner city level 1 trauma center. So was able to see high level trauma, different drugs that infiltrate the city, seeing the difference from inner city drugs to suburban drugs. So then that level then with my career in the fire department, started out when I came on, I was registered nurse. So they didn't have their protocol set up for nurses. So then I went to paramedic school, but then for Missouri, I'm sure most states are this way, that was told to me, you just need to get a accredited paramedic school to back you, and whatever they determine that they want you to do and sign off for you to go take the national registry test, which they said that it could be nothing or it could be you need to do the full course. We sat down with it was the Kansas City Fire Department, which it was masked back at the time. They were separate, the ambulance service and the fire, but they're all one now. But sat down with their instructors and the leadership there at that program, and they had me do about half of the clinical portion, lecture, and then about half of the ride-alongs, and then I was able to go take
Oh, that's
stand for my
awesome.
board. Yeah, and so then I did kind of a reverse bridge from nursing into paramedic. So got that, and then since that, been on the fire department 20 years. Then our department, police department, was wanting to, long even before that, so 10 years ago, with my background in history in the military, and then helping to write policies and procedures, then we stood up the tactical medical team for our SWAT team. So the
Oh,
last 10
cool.
years. And so worked at that. Now I'm the team leader for 7 of our medics. And so we are not part of the stack, people that are with, operators or SWATs. We will go into the hot zone, and we usually are in the barricaded area or in the armored vehicle, which ours is the Bearcat, and provide that. There is some thoughts and some flavor to eventually get us moved into potentially someday being part of the stack, but that is long down the road. And then training is the key to that, and a lot of that with tactics, techniques, and then with pistol rifle qualifications with that. So then there is, so with that, then twice a month we train with the SWAT team and do all that training. So then with that, then on top of that, then, have the military, and then we have at least one large exercise for the comfort. We have a CompX. And then previous to that, then my military career, after being in the hospital, most of it has been operational. So then my career was with Expeditionary Medical Facility Dallas, which would be a combat hospital. The Army used to call them CASH's combat hospitals, if I can
Yeah.
remember the acronym.
Yeah,
And
I've
then
heard
they've
that.
changed their names over the years, but basically the same thing. I just call it combat hospital of a large level NATO Rule 3. And then after that, previous to this was with EMF Great Lakes for 2 years, and then previous to that, then I had a 4-year stint with the Marine Corps, where with 4th Medical Battalion, which is more of a surgical platoon, level 1, level 2, kind of role 2 capability with the Marine Corps, and then being more austere. So got it from the ground level with the Marine Corps, larger scale with that, been in the hospital, MTF, and then now on the kind of a role 3, so to speak, on the hospital ship. So that's kind of my background there, and then diverse. Then for mobilizations, initially when the detainees, when I was still active duty, went and augmented the hospital in Cuba when the detainees first got there. So I was there in 2002 for about a month. And then they took the physical therapy department and they called it the detainee acute care unit. So basically
Whoa.
it was Camp X-ray before they had the buildings. And when the detainees first got there, if they needed any surgical, we were the pre-op and post-op in the detainee acute care. And then they went back down to Camp X-ray. So I was there for that. That was my first. Then in 2009 was actually on the Comfort when they did the Continuing Promise. And so I was not on the full mission, but then was flown into Haiti, got on the ship. We went to Antigua. Then we did a port call in Cartagena, and then did Cologne, Panama. And then in 2012, went to Tarankot, Afghanistan, and was part of a forward surgical team and was there for 7 months in a Role 2. And we was one of the Role 2's feeders for Kandahar. So it was under, at that time, it was all Navy running the Role 2's and the Role 3 there. But then the higher arching command was Army medicine.
Yeah.
During that. And then that was 2012. And then in 2020, mobilized to New York City of the part of the Navy medical support team. And then we went out into the hospitals to my hospital that I went to was Elmhurst Hospital. So was there. Yeah, 2 months. Yeah.
2 months. Wow.
That's diverse career. Yeah. So from then at points of delivering babies, at Portsmouth
You
to
probably
being
delivered
in the
some
back
of
of
my
ambulance.
neighbors. I live
So
here.
back, yeah, I was in labor and delivery 2002, 2003. So yeah, definitely it'd be
I mean, I'm older than them. I promise. They're adults, but gosh, I mean, it's that's awesome. I'm born and raised Virginia Beach, but I live in Portsmouth now, and my husband's from Portsmouth. We always knew that Portsmouth Naval was an okay. We thought it was a good hospital. That's what when we were younger. And then when I got into this career after years of civilian pharmaceuticals, I came here and realized that Portsmouth was the best MTF ever. awesome. I mean, and I call on all of them. So I have high respect for Portsmouth, even though it's in my hood. So thank you for your service and for delivering a lot of people in my community. Now, you have had you have a major career because any given day, you could be in the streets of the inner city providing like first responder medical care. Then you're dealing with COVID in New York City. Then you're then you're on the Haiti and doing a mission there. I mean, there's so much that I want to talk about. I shouldn't talk. You should talk because you have the experience. But let me ask you a broad question, and I'm not going to, and then I want to, we'll ask about specific experiences. But just when I'm hearing your background, it seems to me like you came into, so if you went to college in 99, like you started in your medical career in roughly like early 2000s, I guess you said, right?
Well,
And so,
then I graduated because I started college in the fall of 92. And so I was getting a biology degree to go physical therapy. But then I was 17 credit hours from getting my biology degree. And I switched. So that added 2 years on. So then if you look at credit hours and then since went to the fire academy, which was through a community college. So then if you look at the number of hours, I should have a master's, but I don't. Yeah. So got a lot of credit
I
hours
think
there.
I think
Yeah.
you've done okay for yourself,
Yeah.
sir. Wow. But yeah, so I feel like you have served you've served in the middle of our our war that we just ended. You're seeing all of these new conflicts, then wars, on fentanyl. I mean, all of this stuff, like what have you seen? That's why I'm telling you it's a broad question. But in your time of your professional medical services, like walk me, have you seen what's like some of the most profound things that you've seen as a change? I mean, because it seems like a lot of stuff has evolved, or we've gotten really over the past your whole career in those three different areas. It's like I think about domestic issues, I think about COVID, I think about all of these things that you would see, active shooters. These are in our civilian regular community, and then what all of the things that have happened globally. It's just
So yes, there's a lot of change and a lot of technology, and then medicine will evolve. But then more so, there's a lot of different adapting. Like there's different drugs that are highlighted for different treatments over the years that kind of change, and then some areas they kind of do a full circle that was in flavor. So there's a little bit of that. But the
yeah,
biggest key is there is a lot of advancements in certain areas of medicine. But then speaking primarily to this, people that audience, and that which was profound when I was in Afghanistan. And some of the audience members may not know the show, but MASH. So I mean, you're talking Korean War. So basically, of my experiences, like, pardon my French, was like, holy crap! It was like basically, yeah, there's different technologies. We have level, the Beaumonts or level one infusers for rapid
yeah,
infusers for blood that they didn't have back in Korea, which helps some of the outcomes be much better in saving people. But basically, the core of treating trauma was the same and has been the same and will always be the same.
yeah,
So I mean, there's different nuances of it that can be more profound and advance it, but it's kind of like where now the big thing like tourniquets of the last so many years, but then through the 80s and 90s it was like don't put a tourniquet on, and then now but it was like but then if you go back to some of the damage control books and surgeons from World War II, that's what they were promoting and talking about in the small scale and some of the stuff. Yeah, the technology was different, but then if you go back to the history of that, it's kind of like always history repeats itself. So
yeah,
in some sense that yes, you have to stay up to date with the current meds, some of the current technology, how to do that or implement that piece of medicine, but the core understanding of it and the ideas of it is the same. And then some of it would be what I would tell to everybody: embrace technology, but then also don't get so focused in on the shiny gadgets that in philosophy or understanding look back to the past, because then you
yeah,
may be missing some very simple things that would be profound in the care of your patients.
profound. This past year, or I guess really the past since October, since the situation happened in Gaza, really, it was Ukraine had been going on for a little bit, and we started getting some reports from the field from the IDF, and I'm reading through them, and it was just unbelievable to me because if you compared the casualties from 5 years to 50 years to 150 years, it was hemorrhage control, and it was hypothermia. It was this things that was March, the stuff that we sell to, the stuff that is the basics, and so I I see your point because sometimes, and I'm come from industry, you go to these trade shows and there's like a mannequin that can do 9,000 backflips, speak Farsi, and you can have congestive heart failure and deliver a baby all at once when really it'd be nice if we could just have make sure that everybody knew how to put on a tourniquet, use some good combat gauze, whatever. I mean, just to be able to get the patient out of the line of fire. So, yeah. How do you, I know that you train in a lot of different situations, and then as you're in your military career now, I know that you're doing a lot of curriculum writing or policy writing, I assume. How do you, what's it, whether you're in the paramedic side, the firehouse, or in a mass exercise like you do with the military, these exhibitionary exercises, how do you set the stage to make it highly realistic? Because you've been in some pretty real, you've been in Afghanistan, you said?
Yes.
Right. So you've been in combat there, you've been all these different major places, and plus you're every week, once a month, you're at a trauma one hospital treating probably some crazy stuff. How do you train your people when they're in the classroom and it's not real? How do you train them to so they know that fight or flight, the stress inoculation, things like that? How do you train to that?
Some in the classroom is not as much, but then when we do different exercises, so great, like if you could there's some, I know in Southern California where it's like they were able to go high realistic training in the movie sets and got the bombs and everything going. So that's awesome. I mean, if we can have that, but then some of it, not everybody has the funding, nor is it realistic that we need to put people into that. Some of the tier one guys need that because they're the probability and the not even necessarily probability that they will see that and they'll have to treat that. Understandable. But then mine would be is creating, it can be just simple, just overloading them, because it's kind of like with mass casualty, it's when your goods outweigh the number of casualties, your supply system. So that could be 2 or 3 people if there's just your battalion aid station and you have one doctor and a corpsman or something to that effect. That's a very small battalion aid station, but just the point. But then it's creating chaos within whatever event in it. And the biggest thing is to stimulate the critical thinking, to build the critical thinking. And so there's numerous different ways, and it's just to be ingenious with it. And then the other is within training, you want to always, or it's better, I feel, that if you have good quality, good training gear and teachers and stuff, but then we're all not going to have that, and we don't all have that budgets for that. But then from that, then even within when you're developing the training is part of, for me, learning even for the staff and instructors, because part of it is for the Navy, our potential next fight near peer would be in the Pacific theater, and we'd be very dispersed. We would be without long time getting supplies or less supplies. So you have to, and then there's the big key thing going around, prolonged care, is that you're going to be without your monitors, the gears are limited. You're going to have an overwhelming number of patients. So then you have to start thinking outside the box on your own, being ingenious of how to work through that. And so whenever I can, with the sailors that we have, or with the medics, is stimulate them within their critical thinking. Sometimes it does, and when you talk at this time, you're thinking grandiose and coming up with these big scenarios, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that. Whatever level they're at, if you just create a little bit of chaos or develop that critical thinking, and sometimes it doesn't necessarily even have to be in medicine. If you can just find different aspects to stimulate that brain.
Yeah.
to think outside the box and outside the norm, because meaning, so kind of the quantify that point would be with like TCCC, or say if you're running a code blue, we got these algorithms, you follow it, you want them to know that, but then in the real world, there's going to be, yeah, you want to stay with your protocols and your standard of care, not doing that, and do what's right, but because of the environment you're going to be in, that's not always going to be capable. So you got to think outside the box. So if you're just so ingrained to the textbook or the algorithm, that can sometimes handicap you. So that mine is developing sailors and people to be able to think outside that box, not to be Wild West and freelancing, so to speak, but then be able to, when needed, be able to critically think and see what resources they have, personnel, staff, supplies, and then be able to utilize that to complete the mission, take care of the patients they have at hand.
Yeah, that's so big. I mean, we, you know, when I'm in the field, like, I bring in training gear, like medical simulation gear. So I work with a lot of like, you know, with you guys all the time, and I work with like what at Military Sea Lift Command. They were discussing building a sim labs for each TICOM, and I was in love with it, and I still want to do it. Kind of just been it's a big project. So anyway, I brought in some really high realistic female and male mannequins that were from the UK, and we didn't have a lot of them here yet in the US, and certainly not in the military, these very realistic mannequins. And I brought this one this one in. She's gorgeous. But I brought her in uniform and everything, and we set her all up with just regular TCCC stuff, like a very basic IFAC sort of stuff that we had with this mannequin, right? And we put her in a uniform, and it was unbelievable, like the high reality, like it was unbelievable to see critical thinking. The Master Chief at the time was the medical Master Chief would say, you know, all right, take this off, put on a chest seal, do this. But he would say, this is broken, or do this, or that sort of thing. This isn't going to work. Comms aren't working. Nothing's, you know, these things. And it was unbelievable having like the high reality plus just those little life lessons that you could train on the spot. You kind of watched, you could really see if someone was growing or if they were prepared. Because I think that would be challenging as for someone right now. You know, you and I were talking off the thing earlier. I was asking you certain questions about how are medical professionals and young sailors and medics, corpsmen, people of that nature, how are they post-COVID, during pre-COVID, based on the changes we had in the world during COVID, isolation and stuff like that, you know, just little things that we had with schools being shut down, virtual learning, things like that. And you did give me a big difference. But I guess the question I would have about that is that when you're training to like now, when do you write your curriculums based on your student? I guess you have to follow your curriculum, but then how do you deliver your message to meet today's Navy or today's students and paramedics? I mean, because you do it all, but you know.
So with it, so it made me think of the training I got. So with this, then over my career with the expeditionary medical facilities, we would, to get our training, our large scale training, would do the global medics with the Army. And so with the Army, that's their operational readiness exercises. For the Army, they have a cycle, like it's either a 4 or 5 year window where they're combat hospitals, and that's their culminating event. And they're either at Hunter Liggett or at Fort McCoy. They do basically like a war gaming scenario there with a large number of personnel, you know, anywhere from 4 to 11,000 people.
Oh my gosh.
PPS, the combined support training exercise on top of the medical. So with that, so I basically did that exercise in some sort of fashion from 15 to 23 was part of the Global Medic every year. So with it, got a lot of experience, and then actually went to the point, bringing up the point with this, the observer controller trainer. So the Army has these OCTs. So then when I mean, like then when you have a large budget, large staff, which is awesome. I love the Army.
I know, I do. I've been to Fort McCoy, and I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. You know, like, okay. I've never heard of this.
Then you have, like, back to the point where you're doing training, because you could do the small where you have 3 or 4 people or where you have thousands of people. You have this scenario, and then you want to implement it to the training audience. So with that, then you have obviously, and especially when you get that big, you have somebody that may be brand new, just out of medic or core school, to seasoned doctors, et
Yeah.
cetera, et cetera. So with that, then what I found was I didn't have an understanding because it was coming from the Navy, going in fast and furious into these exercises, but the observer controller trainer is that they're there more as a coach and mentor. And I thought it more of just like they were like evaluating, like, oh, you screwed up, you failed,
Right.
suck. No, it wasn't that. I mean, they do a little piece of that to give you some feedback on your command. But so basically, what they do is each unit would get 2 or 3 OCTs from, like, you would have an enlisted OCT, help with the medics. You would have someone that would be able to, have a nurse. Like if you were in the ICU, they could help with the nurses. And then you may have a doctor that would be in there when it's really robust. But then what I found with that when you're doing those scenarios, you may have a baseline scenario to meet some training objectives that the commander may have for the command. But with that, then those OCTs, they see the deck plate, and then there would be a trusted agent within the command that you could discuss these things. But then you could either slow the training down or speed it up. That was one way. And then you could add nuggets to it based on it. So a lot of it was then initially in 16 when we were doing the exercise, it was very stimulating for the corpsmen and the nurses and some of the ancillary staff, but some of the doctors, especially in the ORs, was not getting stimulated. But they were fine because they understood that the command and the other sailors were getting their training. But then they brought that feedback, and then the OCT staff meets every day, and so then with that feedback, we're like, okay, we'll just, even though the scenario says they had here, we'll add a doctor on to our staff, and then you add a scenario to stimulate them. So then you find ways. Then within that, then it's like what we discussed before. Even if it's in a classroom, knowing your audience, even if you're coming in to present one class, getting to know, spending 10 to 15 minutes of just discussing of where they're at and what their experiences are and what they want to gain out of it, their goals. And so then you can manipulate that. And then what I like about that is that each day you would kind of do an informal after action review and see where they're at and what people liked and what I liked about it. And then another part that I really appreciated from the Army, when they did the large scale, middle of the exercise, they would stop and then they would do a formal after action review from the deck plate to the top. And then you would get feedback from the junior sailors all the way up to the top. But then with that, then normally, like, everybody at the end take this survey, how was this training? And then who knows if you ever hear about it. And then some people, get disenfranchised. Well, like, why am I even filling this out? And,
right. Yeah.
Comes this. So then what I liked about it is that their voice, like, you could see, take input from a junior sailors or sailors and say, okay, they want this. Okay, that's easy day. Let's add this. And then for the next 3 days, you add it and like, oh, wow, they heard my voice. I was impactful. What I wanted, I was able to get impactful training out of it. Yeah. You could do that all through, the ranks or, different levels of care and be able to provide that. So having that OCT piece in there seemed to be very invaluable. One, to help with the training, to input the training, but then I think for the morale and the feedback for it was very highly valuable. Take back from that, and I think that was one piece of
that's good.
Would impart to anybody that's doing training. Yeah, I mean, if you're doing a large scale, you can implement it exactly like that. But then if you just take pieces of it, where it's even like if you're doing a 2-hour training, as an instructor at your break or one of the breaks, like, is this valuable what you get? Just have that conversation with the student and, we're getting burned out on the PowerPoint and give us more stories. We're like your stories, or enough with the C stories, get back to the, the meat and potatoes, whatever it is. Right. But then also then you got to create that environment where your audience is comfortable enough to give you honest feedback too, though.
Yeah, there's a lot of trust. But this is for military, but I mean, I know you wear so many hats, but for military, when you're talking about as a reservist, are you instructing when you're in the instructor role? I know that now you have a different role, but as an instructor, are you teaching reservists that are all medical professional, all nurses too, or are you teaching all TCCC? I guess you.
then we do put on I haven't recently, but then will, when we have a TCCC class going on, but then most of the time now will be a large exercise. So then like one of the examples was back in June, we had the Comfex 24 with active duty. So with it, then with my experience, so then I'm integrated within the reduced operating staff, which is the main active duty component that runs and maintains the comfort. And so
With
then
this on the comfort?
yeah, then when we did the exercises, when they brought in the full operating staff, like the active duty members that would augment it from Portsmouth and the reservists, and so the whole command was there for a week doing training. So then we would do different evolutions and exercises. So then through those you would have from your most junior corpsman all the way up to, your medical providers, your doctors.
Yeah.
And so then, like a lot of people know that most of in the military, at least for the officers and a little bit for the enlisted, you get put into leadership positions. So the ones that are at the deck plate clinical are more of your beginners to mid-range. So then even then, like, the doctors that, I've been a nurse in the medical field for 26 years. So then, no, I don't do medicine, but then concepts and how to do different things and procedures and processes. So then basically you'll be teaching, giving advice to a corpsman, and then the next second you may be talking to a doctor or a nurse and giving them guidance on how to help with the trauma evolution or whatever's going on.
That is, you have to be like a chameleon. I mean, to work with, to be able to communicate.
But a lot of those times, but then the context to that though too, is that when we do some of those exercises, we're not teaching medicine, because medicine, most of those people, medicine is learned, at the MTF core school or wherever. So we're teaching some of the processes and procedures of how to run a combat hospital or how to run the hospital ship, the hospital on the ship. And so some of that is that's just learning, is taking yourself, like, I know that nurse knows that medicine, how to do those, but then how to do it with now, how do you do paper charting? How do you track patients? How do you do this? That type of thing. How do you write, an x-ray chit to, get an x-ray for this patient, going through all those type of steps and helping them with that. And then in the midst of the chaos, how to, like remain level-headed, calm instructions to your corpsman, to doc, and all that.
Ask you about level-headedness. And you can go into this if you'd like. I mean, it's to me so interesting. You said that you were basically at ground zero during COVID, in the beginning of COVID. That's amazing. I think about how stressful that must have been for an elongated period of time, being in the battlefield for a long time, a hospital ship. Great Lakes is no field day in the winter, right? All of these things are stressful. And you have to make decisions, train, have a good attitude, all of these things. How can you, plus being in all the trauma situations that you're doing in Firehouse and Paramedicville, okay? How do you train people on keeping their balance or keeping themselves not to get lost in a mental health spiral or anything like that? I mean, the fight or flight, until I could see where, especially you're not leaving each place that you're going in your day to day. I mean, I couldn't imagine what church is like for you, like on Sunday. I mean, how do you keep it together? I couldn't even.
My wife complains, like, you have a side job, but can't you just do something that is non-stressful and not
like work at like Old Navy? Like, I'm not saying that's not stressful, but
be the greeter at Walmart or something.
Right? Yeah, just go like be a layperson somewhere and not jump out in front of guns every day. Yeah, she must have a lot of faith
with that. Yeah, it's interesting you brought that up. So then, with our fire department, to expand and to build, went through an accreditation process back in 2015. Part of that, then there's different things that need to be done, and one of those was health and wellness. Well, then you dive down in health and wellness, then you get into the mental health. Yeah. And so in 2015, I started the peer support program and wrote that policy for our fire department.
Oh my gosh.
So then I was a peer supporter. And so then real quick, that looked at a bunch of different modalities, things that were going on across the country that, was a little bit in the infancy there. The big one and the one that we liked was FDNY. And then the things that they went through after 9/11. And so
gosh.
key pieces that will relate back to this. So with that, after 9/11, they were thrown everything and anything. And there's some Rescue Me. There's an episode where it shows that they had mental health providers put into each firehouse, and that went over like a turd in a punch bowl. But then basically what they found out about it was because then a lot of them, their trauma, they had so much trauma. When the guys finally, some of them did talk about it, they caused the mental health providers trauma because
Oh
what they were sharing.
gosh.
So it was the whole dynamics, they weren't ready at that time. The whole community from top to bottom over across the country has expanded and got much better. But the biggest thing that they found is that yes, having mental health providers is needed in the right environment, and even then they utilize it today. But then the big key was the peer support and leaning on each other. And then I'll get back to that, but then the big piece to that was World War II vets. From afar, weren't studying at the time, but then we can see that they did much, much better. Big key factor there for them was when they left whatever theater they were in, they got on a ship with their peers or buddies that were in the ship with them, and they spent 2 weeks cussing and
Yeah.
discussing and talking about it and decompressing with like-minded people that understood and was there with them. Then speed it up to Vietnam. You're in the shit. You're in the gun. You got on a plane. You went home. There was a nasty environment when they landed, but they didn't have any of that decompression part of it. And so so then we've learned that there's that piece of creating a comfortable environment and then being able to share that with it. So what we're trying to move the needle, and it's always a challenge, is that we have at our firehouse, we have 8 companies, 7 fire stations. It's about 135,000 people now in the community that we serve. And so with that, then all of us, and we have 3 shifts. So like that's one big family. But then mine is like your immediate family would be kind of like the way I describe it as the company that you work with. And so we're trying to create that environment at the firehouse where that behind closed doors, if you run something traumatic, that you should be able to feel comfortable that when you're at the dinner table eating dinner with the guys or girls and they're at the coffee table, that you feel comfortable that you can express your emotions and share. But then when you go out that door, if you still want to, portray that superhero mentality, that worker firefighter mentality, and then get the praise, great.
Right.
And then it's like create that, but then other companies may come in. Yeah, they're family, so we're closer with them, but they're more like kind of like cousins.
You're
Even
right.
though because we don't live and sleep with them and eat with them, so yeah, we'll share more with them, but we may not as much. And then we have the peer supporters and a list that of different variants from new guys to guys that have been on forever that you can call and talk to. And then with that, then we have a critical incident list of certain type of calls that will be intrusive to not a massive intrusive, but if say that you run a pediatric code and then they die, so that we're automatically going to be calling, reaching out to those members regardless, just because of the type of the call.
Way to go. Is that a standard, like, is that across the board a standard practice, or is this something that y'all just do?
This is, there's several that are doing it across country, but this is what we do and we've expanded. So from what I've seen along that, we're pretty far ahead in it. We have a long ways to go in some aspects of it, but there's some things that we're doing great and some things, that need a little bit more aspects of it. And then some of it is also, like most enterprises, we got about 200 employees. So you have different subsets of, you got the old school generation and the way that they were treated and the mentality. You got the middle. So then there's different leveling of thoughts and processes and things, the way that things went. I would share one of my personal example. So with it, so then being this and learning and understanding it, one, share the example, but then for context, after I came back from Afghanistan, then I don't know if I never was diagnosed with PTSD, or if it was to that level, because it wasn't in the environment to be diagnosed, but then had combat stress and then went to some therapy, but then it took my wife saying that, hey, you're not right. I could quantify that, but to the point, coming back to this point, would be, so then having that and then starting the peer support and being passionate about it, then one of mine, so I was with this and trying to encourage our members and share this, and then would share the audience member. So then on my off day was working in the ER, and then had a gunshot wound come in, and it was a 18-year-old that just literally, sometimes everybody, they said, I was just minding my own business. Yes. But this one truly was minding his own business, caught in the crossfire, got hit. he got hit in the spine, so now he's paralyzed from the waist down. He was somewhere between the ages 16 and 18. And you don't want anybody to be, paralyzed, but then you're like, I was just, just so raging mad because it's like, he had his whole life in front of him. He wasn't doing any, nefarious in bad activities, gang
Yeah.
activities, whatever that. And just, and it's like, and then was better about it and sharing it with my wife. And then that's a whole nother conversation of how you share with your loved ones. Because early in my career, overshared, or the details and the verbiage that I used was too much, but then learned how to express that. But so expressed to my wife, she's like, okay, hey, let's go eat, let's decompress. So then, as soon as I got home from the ER shifts, we all, the kids and everybody, we got in and just kind of decompressed, like, okay, cool. That helped a little bit. So
Cool.
then go into, fire the next morning, because then I'm starting my fire shift. And then we start at 8, but then we got a call like I usually, when you come in, I'm under the merit, that day was going to be the paramedic on the ambulance. So as soon as I get there, because I was at a busier station at that time, the changeover, so I'll get all my fire gear on and everything, because as medics here, we do fight fire and do the medical side of it, depending on the type of call. So with it, got my gear on, I was all set up to go like at 7:40. And so I still had the driver, which would have been someone from the off-going shift. We got a suicide by gun at one of the high schools. So then a girl had brought a handgun, and then committed suicide in a restroom at the high school. So then you're dealing with all that. So then, ran that call and then come back, but then it's basically like, I realized like I was tapped out. But then with all that, then you don't necessarily want somebody just to go home, if they have weapons or alcohol or whatever, and be by themselves. So mine, and then our chief was very proactive. And so mine was like, hey, I can work, but I can't be the primary paramedic. So then what they did was rearrange the staffing. And then, I was just a firefighter on the fire pumper engineer, on the engine, and was able to do that so that I could be around my brothers and sisters still at the fire station. They could watch out for me, look at me, and make sure that I was doing good, but yet not have to necessarily be in that primary role. So which is hard, especially like in the ER and some other environments, or if you're, in war, you gotta, which sucks with a lot of these things is you have that event and you got to go right back to work. Is what's very difficult and very hard. So mine is very challenging. Don't know what the answers are, like within nursing, medical field doctor, but then as leaders and even as anybody from the deck plate up, got to speak out. Leaders may not have the answers, and I may not have the answers for the deck plate, but then we got to do something that if members, if they have something that they need to take a knee, that doesn't mean that you're weak or anything, but you just need time to get yourself back together, type of thing. So then that's where I'm hoping that we can grow as a community with this and help provide that support so that we can lean on each other and deal with this. So that could be a whole like a week-long discussion.
Oh, I know. I mean, I want it to be. I mean, I want it to be. This is my favorite. I love discussing mental health, and I'm like what you're saying. I don't understand. No one understands the solution to it, but I like your idea. You're the first officer that I've ever talked to about. I've talked to high-ranking enlisted people and things like that, and I know to you say, don't give me a title, call me Jake. I hear you. I agree. I think you act the same. I think that all of y'all are, so it doesn't, that whole thing is confusing me. But as a policy writer and things like that, I do love your idea of well, it's not an idea, you're doing it, that you're having it be part of the SOP to that the leaders call
so
you when you've
with our
had
peer
it.
support team, with that, what it is that with that it's not the supervisors, so it's all at the deck plate.
That's so good.
People, so then it's very confidential, and we keep it very confidential. And so then a lot of it, even when I was running the program, members were utilizing it. I knew someone utilized it. I didn't know who, I didn't know what about. And so they thought later when they felt confident, they told me, it's like, oh, I thought you knew this weeks ago. It's like, no. And then I would share that to them as like, to keep the validity of the program and keeping it going and trustworthy. There's a lot of confidentiality in it. But then
That's
back to
awesome.
the point was that, yeah. So like, then there's another one, our chief, being very proactive on our shift. There was a guy, younger gentleman, late 20s, 30s, lost his mind. I'll keep it at that, so to speak. But anyway, went and drowned his kid, like a
Oh,
1 or 2 year old. And so then, the cop, there's actually on Sean Ryan, the lead sheriff or cop was interviewed about this call. Kind of a small world. Anyway, and then, but we heard that call go out, and then my chief was like, hey, this is going down. And so then myself and another peer supporter was back at the station by the time they got back from the children's hospital.
my
It
gosh.
was, then we took them out of service for at least an hour, and then we just decompressed and talked about it. So then another key piece that I'll put up, back in the day, there was a critical incident debriefing type of things where then anytime there's a critical call, they'd bring everybody in and debrief the whole call. Then from FDNY, they figured out, like, because they send a lot of people a lot of manpower to calls, but there may only be like 7 or 8 people that dealt with the trauma, but there may have been 100 people on the call. So
Yeah.
then you have everybody in a conference room or auditorium, and then there's a secondary trauma because, like, I knew that went down, but I didn't. And then when people share their stories, so then not to get the secondary trauma, we only bring people into a room that need to be or be there. And then with it, then I would do what I found out. I don't know if this is right way or wrong way, but just from the training that, like, going back to the after action reviews that I got from the military, kind of more of an informal, but then would preface it is that we're not here to go over the protocols or standard of care. Let's just talk about the chronological, what went down. And usually once I found that when we do this, start talking about, okay, well, we did this in the sharing of the event, people then will eventually, as they feel comfortable, start sharing their feelings and their thoughts about the call and start expressing that. And
Yeah.
then one of the guys that now, he's very passionate about it, had some other of his own issues, but was on that call. He's so passionate about it now that he's going to get his master's in, social work to be
I
able to
was going
be
to
a
ask
mental
you.
health provider.
It's
But
amazing.
with that is that they took positive feedback from it, and it wasn't, we're not critiquing or like, okay, you didn't give the right dose or you could have did better at this. None of that. It was just like, let's go through and just talk about the call. And then there's some people that, based on the personality or whatever, didn't want to share. So be it. But they were
Right.
there. And a lot of them, when we have these, maybe not to that level, have reached out to them, that just that you reached out and thought of me and cared
Yeah.
was a huge thing. Like,
Mhm.
didn't even need to talk. It's like, oh, okay, someone understands that it's okay not to be okay at this moment.
Yeah. Yeah. God, I love this. That is so good. When I think about, I've thought about this a lot in my own life since 2020. I've just, the nature of my profession, right? I'm in outside sales, but I call on the federal government. So if uh, there was a year there that a contractor couldn't go on a base and we couldn't no one knew, we knew how to operate mannequins, but we did not know how to use Zoom. So all of these things we were learning on the fly with our MTFs. And it was hilarious and we worked together and we did a great job and it was fun. But I watched how the world has changed. I mean, and I go and I look at each of you know about upcoming conflicts or current conflicts, domestic possibilities all the time you hear of. You're physically seeing things at the Trauma One thing. Good Lord, Trauma One Medical Center, and doing the firefighter paramedic. Have you noticed? Have you noticed over the since maybe is it since COVID or maybe right after Afghanistan started or something? Is there a time, have you noticed do you believe that we're in a mental health crisis? Do you feel like we're getting better and coming back up? Because you're seeing it on from every branch or every area as a
So
community or a people.
I'm probably not, I'll just preface it. I may not be the quantify this in terms financial, but the way I would see it is, at least from my perspective where we're at, yes, I'll say yes and no. So yes,
Yeah.
there's a crisis, but then some of it is, I think we're pushing the needle to where we're more open about it and we're wanting people to talk about it. So
Yeah.
then there is one of the guys we looked at. I'm trying to can't remember the acronym, but basically he was this organization was the first in the fire industry to look at suicides and documenting it. Well, obviously, they'll admit it and they still admitted it, is that they can't get an accurate count because it's not accurately reported. But then now the numbers are, like trending way up. Some of it is, yes. So there is, you got to look at both sides of it. Is there an increase of suicides? Well, some of it, there may be that. So you got to go down that avenue. But then there also may be the incidence of more reporting and more openness about it. And so there's both, you got to attack it from both sides, not ignore one or the other, or just say it's one. But then I think that a lot of it is we're more open to it. And then in some avenues, we're wanting that and then creating the environment. But then it's, which is really hard. And then I would favor, especially coming from a leadership standpoint, favor in events that something's really going on. But then and then some of this is where it's hard with the military, especially if you get into more of the operational type units, is the stigma of, is someone now, okay, this is open and we can do this, is someone using this as a crutch or trying to get out of something?
Yeah.
So mine would be favor, like, okay, you just got to look at it that they're not and be open with it. But then there's always, I guess, anything in life, people can put a negative spin on it or use it in a negative way. So then with that, I would say that don't let those incidences or the possibility to deter you from doing the positive and doing what's right.
Yeah, gosh, that's good. I know I interviewed somebody that we talked about mental health. He himself was diagnosed with PTSD and he was going to go into social work after retirement. And then he felt, because he was a survivor and getting through it himself, I never thought about that, but he had a hard time identifying or being a therapist or helper to someone if he felt that it wasn't authentic, if it was for a different whatever, whatever the reason might be. And I thought, gosh, that's interesting that you'd have to even look out for that, because we tell people, please say something, please tell somebody, say something. And then I could see how that's a challenging catch 22.
One of the things that made me think of this, because then my wife was in the behavioral health field for a while, not as a medical provider or healthcare, but there was an incident with one of the neighboring fire departments where the type of call that went out. So you had basically a brand new firefighter and a very seasoned firefighter. They both, put them over their boiling point, so to speak. So with it, then kind of the analogy, what we've been taught is that we all have our backpack or a rucksack that we carry. And so then almost all these events, they're trauma to some extent. It may just be a little pebble, or, you see a pediatric code. That's a big.
Yeah.
So then for the experienced people, that rucksack can only hold so much. And so then what we found too is that you may run the little old lady that is having problems with paying for stuff or whatever. You pick her up off the floor and all of a sudden you're messed up. Well, that was that one pebble that made you fall over. But then you're distraught because, like, what? Why would, I've been doing this for how many years? Why would that one cause me? But then back to the original part, but the same call. So a newbie, was just distraught because of what he saw. But he didn't want to say anything because, like, well, this is part of the career. You're supposed to suck it up and move on. And then you got the senior, captain. But it was basically saying that for different reasons or different mechanisms, you could be the same call. You could be the person that's been in the military for 26 years or the one that just got out of corps school, and it can mess you up. And it could be the same exact experience. So then with that, from whatever level, just need to be open and be able to speak up that it's okay not to be okay, and just kind of keep reiterating that message, and that talk to, your sailor to your left and right, and, letting people know and creating an environment, if you're in leadership position, that you can share this and seek help.
I love that. I mean, I'm so happy to hear this. I'm so happy to hear this. I mean, this is I'm a little I'm speechless. That analogy of the pebble and the thing, it's funny. I have a mentor, female mentor at church. She's awesome. And she sent me this image, of like a young girl, but and it was like put it down, or whatever, your past or whatever, and each pebble is a different thing. But I like the way that you're describing it as each incident, because a lot of times if an incident sets me off for like panic or like an anxiety type thing, right? If it sets me off, I will question, because I have anxiety when I'm debriefing it. I'll be like, why did that situation, and I'm naming it on the one, but really it's not. It could be, I work with one of my favorite customers is in Lebanon, on the street, in healthcare, getting bombed every day. Then I'm dealing with people with no budgets. I'm talking to, all the time. There's a lot of different things going on. We don't know what's happening in the world. You personalize it to some extent because you love your customers, you love your people, you love the Lord. I mean, it's whatever. You love your dog, you love your husband, wife, your case, Chiefs, Steelers. But you want to live a regular life and be happy and everything, but you do see all this stuff. And so I like that you can educate your trainers, because that's where it starts, right? I mean, you have to train the trainer, and which means that the trainer needs to learn. So you're good for you for researching it. But yeah, you have to educate your trainers to educate that, hey man, it's not, this one thing didn't make you break, but it could have started from 6 years ago, and all of these little things that have gotten progressively worse. And I couldn't imagine the back-to-back traumas like that. But I want to do more on this. I hope to hear that people
But then
do
you also
more
have to be
peer
inclusive
support.
that it's not just the fire department or whatever calls. Then we're holistic. We have families. We got stressed at home. It could be financial. It could be
Yeah.
illness with somebody. And so then you got to, whatever platform enterprise you're with, make sure that you're holistic. So then with this, then back to the training piece of this, then when we're doing the AARs at the end of them, whether it's informal or formal, with my EXO, he's very passionate about this too, is that we impart this with our training at the end of it, or we'll, in the middle of it, depending on what it is. And then, because then with this, then looking forward, is that I brought up a little bit about this aspect when we were in New York during COVID, and then how I saw how that with kind of the newer generation now that
Yeah, will you explain that? Because we did that you told me about that off the camera. That blew my mind. Will you explain that?
so I'll get to that, but then the point, get back to the point,
Sorry.
but then the other is that then moving forward for our military members, so we're going into the near peer, and then for the Navy, Marine Corps, into the Pacific, or I guess would be for anybody else, is that now the potential to call it World War III or whatever it will be labeled, that the number of casualties that we're going to see are going to be unfathomable.
Right.
And so with that, the mental anguish and the aspect of that is going to be overwhelming. I don't think there is 100% way to prepare for that. But then part of this is everything that we're discussing is that you got to build that resiliency and have an understanding for that so that you'll be able to function and work into that aspect.
I was actually going to ask you about that. I was going to say, well, what do we do in preparation for what's happening now? Because, I mean, far more than I do. Oh my gosh. I mean, what is that like? The fact that you could be called up. I mean, man, yeah. How do you prepare? How do you prepare your sailors
So then one, we just
and your family and yourself?
So I don't think there's 100% way to do it, but then you just have to create that resiliency in the mentality. And I think we're, even in culture, seeing that shift where everybody's like, oh my goodness, with everything going on, but it's seeming that shift back, having some sort of faith-centric aspect. I mean, that's, especially military, that's wide open, but then having that, I believe, having the physical, the mental, the home, and then the other learning to it is, I mean, military is staying in shape, but then a big thing of working out even when you're downrange is, even if it's just body stuff, if you don't have equipment because wherever you're stationed, but get your endorphins going. That helps with your mental capability, forcing that or making it kind of mandatory, doing group stuff to get that going. Anything and everything, be holistic about it, but there's no way to prepare for seeing hundreds or thousands of casualties. I guess one example would be like at Iwo Jima with the corpsmen there, seeing that number of body and having to deal with it. There's no way to prepare mentally for it. But I think at that time, the lifestyle that they lived in the life across the country and that resilience and just leaning on each other. And so with that, then developing that is the best attempt at that.
Yeah.
So with that, then coming back, then you were mentioning with New York. So New York, without going way deep into the details of it, so where I went to the epicenter, which was Elmhurst Hospital. And so when we went there, so it's I think a 53 bed hospital normally. And so when we went in, so we did a pre-deployment site survey about like the week before, because we were like, we're not sending our people in because we don't even know, like, do they have the right proper PPE prevention
Right.
stuff? Like, what are we getting to? Like, we don't want to just send our military members in there and then all of a sudden they're all sick and then they're all patients too.
Yeah, right.
And so then when we did that and made it sure that it was, going to be at that time, we didn't know what we didn't know, but meet risk benefit safe enough to go in. But then when we hit the deck plate there, so then it's like a 53. So I think it had way more. I don't even know what the total number of patients were in the ER, probably well over 100, but 40 of them were on ventilators.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember during that time, I had a dear friend that was from like a women's group that I'm in. She's so nice, and she couldn't get in touch with her sister. I mean, at all. She's older than I am, and I'm a baby. So she's older than I am. No, she's like probably in her, I don't know, late 50s. Her sister was older than her, so maybe early 60s back then. And she couldn't get in touch with her sister, couldn't get in touch with her sister. Her sister was in normal health. I mean, it wasn't, she didn't have a lot of comorbidities, normal health, but she succumbed to COVID living alone in New York City and hadn't talked to anybody, that sort of thing. And they looked at it, was it our ventilation? And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you're going to learn after the fact. But it was just, I couldn't imagine having the balance to get through it when you did, or to be the leader during it. I mean, that's got to be hard because you're in fight or flight. But you've got to maintain your cool. You got to be a leader for everybody. I still think it's afterwards, the decompression part, you're probably still doing it. But I'm glad that you know how.
And part of it, I think I thought it was kind of wonky. I mean, and you fight it because of the policies and the reasons and the why. But then so when we left there, we had to test negative to leave. So then we went through our out processing, and then we went back to Portsmouth, and then we ROMed, so quarantined for 2 weeks at the Renaissance there in Portsmouth. And then we had to get a negative test to get on a flight to fly home. So it's like, okay, even at the time, you're like, so I have to be negative, but I can get on an airplane and then probably potentially catch it again and spread it. So it's like, whatever.
Right.
But back to the mental health piece, even though that was wonky of the reasons why, I mean, you can figure that all out or discuss and change the way you did it. But then as a unit, though, we, was there for 2 weeks to be able to decompress and hang out together. So in that sense, when you look back at it and you look at the whole mental health piece, regardless, I think that was a very positive aspect of it.
That's true.
Yes and no, but then in that sense, so it's positive, but then there's a happy balance because then you're still away from your family, you're still away from other high stressors. So it's kind of that give and take.
Yeah. And I bet in that area too, because of your different roles, being in Portsmouth, going to the epicenter in New York, then coming back to Portsmouth, that's where I live. I remember when it was a long time difference, when y'all came back for when we got the wave, but then going to Kansas, get back home, then you like got 3 first waves, or really, I mean, that's incredible. That's incredible. We're at a time of a good stopping point, but I'm never stopping learning from you now because I have learned way more about you, and I want mental health to me. And I think clearly to you, it's a passion. I mean, my background is selling in psychiatry for over 20 years, and then I came into military medicine, and I serve you guys every day. This is how I serve, is to bring you the best. I try and just get you your stuff how you want it, and package it the right way and help you meet your needs and stuff like that. And that's how I serve, right? So when I'm meeting with with my clients, they are like my battle buddies too. And I grew up here, so I get to watch this is my life, this is my community, and I thank you guys so much. And so when I spend time and I know that mentally something's hard, or even if it could not be like you were saying, it could be your son or daughter right now in high school, it could be your wife, it could be anything that's happening and going on. It's like I love the approach of saying, like, we need to talk about it because a lot of people are sick, and people still are afraid to talk about it. And I feel like the biggest heroes definitely fight for me every day, but they also fight for themselves. And so I thank you for leading that charge. I'm telling you, Jake, that's killer. Thank you. Um, I want to thank you today for your time and tell the listeners. It seems to me that you've read a lot of really awesome studies that you've referenced. You've done a lot of research for policies that you've written. I have a lot of listeners on here that are their policy writers in their respective countries or commands, wherever they are, whether they're first responders or military. And I know they're going to want to hear about some more of the stuff. So if someone reaches out to me, can I give them like, yeah, okay, I'll reach to you and say like, hey, will you tell me about the study that you did for FDNY or that you've read about, to help your policy? Tell me more about your peer support group. If you don't mind, that'd be awesome. And I'm just
Definitely, yeah.
thankful.
And then obviously, if anybody is in the military, so proper name's Jacob, Jacob, and
Yeah.
then last name's Wiemann, Wiemann. And then if you are in the military, the global, you'll be able to find me. And then
Yeah.
on the comfort. So yeah, there's there.
I mean, that's a great job. You have an
And then
awesome
either way, yeah,
career.
on social media, yeah, on Facebook or
Yeah.
Navy. I
Yeah.
think yeah, you can find me with Jacob Wiemann, but then on to like X, I think I go by Navy Fire RN.
Oh, killer. I love that. Okay. Watch out. I'm gonna start stalking you. And if there's any salespeople, they will too, probably. Okay, well, that's killer.
Obviously,
Yeah.
being an older generation, don't post a ton, but yeah.
Yeah. No, you from being my Facebook or you LinkedIn person, it's like I post industry stuff all the time, but I mean, I'm not just sitting around posting. I'm not.
Well, and then speaking of that, so then in the mental health piece, so then and this is not being intrusive, and then do it in a way, and then find it appropriate, is that I right and wrong, I don't know if this is right, what my higher ups would say, but follow a lot of my command and sailors. Not so much now the newer ones, but over the years.
Yeah.
But then just kind of watch their posts, and then there's been a handful of times where they're a little off, or they say something wonky,
Yeah.
and so then I get a hold of the chief or whatever, and then they find a battle buddy to like reach out to them, like, hey, how you doing? Everything okay?
Yeah.
And then even be to the point, it's like, hey, we saw what you posted. And so we want people to post those things, and not that we're saying that, hey, you can't post this, do this, or we're meddling in your business, but it's just that we want you to live the best life, and
Yeah.
then be able to have a wonderful career, and then, get to retirement and enjoy it. Not to know you can't post that, you're posting the wrong type of things, or
Gosh, yeah.
into
I'm
any of
so
the political
glad.
things, but it's just more to just check out on each other. And it's not, I'm not, yeah, trying to be your mom or dad and saying that you can't do this. Not that aspect of trying to emphasize the point that we're truly looking out for our sailors, for our people.
Yeah.
And so with that, so then that's another way, is to the left and right, watch each other's social media. I mean, that's, I guess it is the way of the world right now. And then
It is the way. Yeah.
as leaders follow that, and then you can keep kind of a pulse on your members too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. That is awesome feedback. Like we watch all these studies about how, like this year, the presidential election, they were talking about, how much was the presence on old school media versus social media, and just on a marketing and reach and frequency basis, hands down, it was one through like podcasts, social media, and stuff that we're not usually used to, like a debate on CNN or Fox or whatever, right? And I was thinking about that, going, gosh, that is pretty unbelievable. The power of the post, the power of the social media stuff. We don't know who's watching, but I'm a youth director, like retired. Maybe I'm off duty right now, but I've always been a youth director. I'm not currently today, but I feel like I'm the United Nations youth group. So a leader. So I have a lot of kids everywhere, but a lot of them are in the military now. It's just crazy. If I see some of my kids, because I don't have my own kids, so if I see some of my kids just starting to post some weird stuff in their early 20s or whatever, Miss Liz gets to, I mean, that is my first red flag because that's how people communicate now. It's not the way that we are but you can hide behind it. It's weird. We're all learning it, but we're all works in progress. But living in this community where I live in Portsmouth, and we have very, very high officers that come in from the United States Navy and say, hey, we're here for your community. We know when if there's an incident or something like that, it matters so much to hear that you're not saying, let's nickel and dime every outcome. Or in our AAR, let's find everything wrong. No, you're not saying that. You're saying, let's treat the sailor. Let's make the sailor have an awesome future, having a killer blessed life, and and be able to have the balance, and I respect yours. Geez, I don't know how you do it. You definitely have a higher power. And I thank God for you, because whoa, I don't know how they make people that could, and most of my listeners are like y'all are just saving lives every second. So thank you for your service. I also wanted to show everybody that, if you don't mind, this is your amazing, very, very cool coin. Look at Jacob's coin, or Jake. He says Jake. Captain's coin. I love it. Kansas City. Go Chiefs as my second favorite team. So thank you, Jake, for being on today.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, to share. Didn't know that it's awesome, because we didn't, we were just gonna have a discussion and didn't know it was gonna go the mental health route. So that was awesome that it just naturally went the way it did. So appreciate that.
Me too, clearly. I mean, it's like, I believe that God is like lighting a path for you in this area, and it went there because we didn't even know. I mean, I was like, what? Did not even know. And so yeah, we just thought we were going to talk about training. I am thrilled. So thank you so much. And if you don't mind, I have talked to several people with your type of experience and tenure in the military, and I've asked, can we do a mental health, like several episodes on mental health, ones that are extreme, and I'd love for you to come back if you will.
Oh yeah, but my pleasure. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. All right, everybody, thank you so much for coming on today for Splints and Whiskey. Thank you to my friend Jake, and we look forward to hearing all your awesome stories, and to continue to bring our combat heroes, my favorite simulation superstars and healthcare heroes, to Splints and Whiskey. So thank you so much. And Jake, you have an awesome day.
Thank you. Yeah.